All right, Gresham, we got together finally. I know we had some hiccups along the way, but I'm sure you got a great journey to share with the listeners. And so just to backtrack a little bit, me and Gresham met through a Facebook group and we just connected like that and just had a little chit chat just like this on the Zoom. And so here we are today. So Gresham, I'll open it up to you. You can share who you are and what you're doing, and then we'll just see how you got to where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you being patient, Jon. You're awesome for doing this, and I love everything that you're doing. And I think so many times when we think about the journey and where people are going, we never hear the behind the scenes parts. We just see where they're at. And I appreciate you for giving me the opportunity, but of course sharing so many stories of people. But for me, like I kind of keep myself busy. I always say I'm an entrepreneur. I usually just say busybody because I'm involved in a lot of different things, but two main things keep me the busiest. The first is I have a digital marketing company based out of the DC area in Alexandria, Virginia. We focus on website support, maintenance, web design, and SEO as well too. But those are at the end of the game. At the end of the day, I say the name of the game is being found. So we help people to build that foundation to be found. And one of the core parts of like my marketing philosophy is I say like everybody is a media company and should be in the media business, should be leveraging, content and information to really try to serve and create an impact with the audience that they're trying to work with. So my media company is called CB Nation. So I have a daily podcast, blog posts, video content, all to help CEOs and entrepreneurs and business owners to succeed. So it's all around, understanding what someone has done to be successful and try to unlock a lot of those tools and tips and tidbits. And I call them hacks and nuggets. But at the end of the day, like how can we, as entrepreneurs or people in the business community, be able to level up as well too?
Yeah, it sounds like you do have a lot going on. I don't know if you mentioned everything, but it's still a lot. So all right, so you're doing all this stuff, websites and everything else for people. I mean, was that something that was something that you really was passionate about in the beginning? Okay. And so how did you come across setting this all up, doing the websites? Like, I mean, what drove you to do this?
Yeah, well, I think like I always, when I graduated from college, I came into college, I was undecided, didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up, was trying to figure out what that should be, what that looked like, and was, just really trying to understand myself more than anything else. So I went through like this process, and I don't know if I learned it from anybody else or heard it, but I went back in kind of like that time machine and started to think about like what things did I do before I knew what made me tick, what things did I do that was kind of unique and kind of like off the wall. And one of the things that I came upon was I started a family newspaper when I was 10 years old. And the backstory to that was my dad was in the military, so he got reassigned to go to an entirely different country. So that me and my dad, and still are, but definitely at that time, I'm an only child. So he was like my big brother, lot bigger brother, but a bigger brother nevertheless. And so I used to play basketball, do all the fun things. And so when you heard that, it was really hard for me. I know it was really hard for my mom as well too. But I think one of the things that I did before we had Skype, FaceTime, Zoom, all these kind of instant access things that we can connect with people anywhere, is we didn't have a way to do that. So we would send my dad monthly care packages. In those care packages, we would put honey buns, like all the things that he wanted, and I mean, really made him excited. But I started then that family newspaper, and I started to put stories of what was going on in our family. So there was a squirrel that got into my grandma's house, so I had that on the front page. My mom's sister was supposed to get married to somebody, and that didn't happen. So that was a cover story. So basically like TMZ for your family. That's kind of like what I was doing. And to take it back a lot further, I was trying to understand, okay, this is something that is a little bit unusual, something that I was really excited to do. And I'm not sure why, but that became kind of like my North Star for like who I was. So fast forward a lot of years when I was thinking of like, how do I do the things that I do? I was like, all I know is I love talking with people. I love interviewing people. I love sharing stories, capturing, doing all the creative things. So that's really what laid that foundation of like a lot of the things that I'm doing now. Is I call it my first media company, be able to share about my grandma. But that was like that foundational piece that kind of led me to a lot of things I'm doing now.
That's pretty cool. Was that your own idea then? Is it?
I don't remember. Like my mom kept all of them. So I did it for about 2 years. So I have them all digitally, and I was going through them and I was like, how did I, think about all these things? But of course, my mom, and as she should, takes all the credit. So I will give all credit to her and my dad for everything.
There you go. Yeah, you should put that out there. The stuff that you would be willing to share. That's kind of pretty cool. So, did you like have pictures of everything, and you like a whole newspaper? Is that kind of how you did it?
Yes, so I had clip art. So I would get on Microsoft Word, I would put clip art there, and I would have like a headline. And I would also, I started to like diversify a little bit because I was a big sports fan. So I started to put sports highlights and things like that. And then my mom would read certain things like the soap, the soap operas and stuff like that. They had like the digest of those. So I would put little tidbits of those. So I started to like compile a lot of different things to try to attract more people to the newspaper. But I think the kicker was I also sold the subscriptions to like my family members and things like that as well too. So I had a little empire that was growing, but that's where I say I got my, I did little things like, selling potato chips and things like that when I was younger, but I felt like I got those ideas probably from seeing somebody else do this. This was a little bit more like, I don't know a lot of people that were doing that at 10. So that became my story.
That's pretty cool. That's a good story. I like that. Hey, I never heard that before. You know what I mean? So, I mean, you enjoyed it, right? You enjoyed making this and collecting the stories with your family and everything. So, did your father express how he felt about it? Did he enjoy them as well, or even more than that?
Yeah, what's funny enough, so years later, my dad was still like overseas, and I think you hear about stuff, kind of not directly, but you hear about it in a roundabout way. Somebody called our house and was talking with my mom. It was like telling her all these things that were going on in the family. I call him my Uncle Darren, but he was saying all these things, like, and my mom's like, how does he know all this stuff? And come to find out, my dad was sharing the newspaper with everybody he was over there with. So as much as he got I'm sure he enjoyed the oatmeal cream pies and the honey buns and all those things, but just hearing that about him sharing that, a lot of times you say actions speak louder than words, and that really touched me. Still touches me now, of him just thinking something of what I created and to be able to kind of share that about. So it just ends up being more fuel, but being able to kind of have a way to have that connection and that opportunity, like really hit home.
That's cool. Yeah, that's awesome how it became like full circle. I mean, you got to hear the same stuff that you created from somebody else.
Exactly.
So what happened after that? So that kind of got you started. Then what?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I mentioned about like being undecided, I went back and I saw that story and I said, you know what, I really like writing. That was my thing. At that time, it was not the golden age of journalism. So I said, hey, I really want to be a journalism major, but I don't know how that's going to pan out. So I decided to focus on English. So I became an English major, really just like writing and telling stories. So, got through my undergrad at Howard. And then I thought that I might want to go to law school. So I wasn't sure, took the LSAT, got a lot of rejection letters. I didn't score well. And then I ended up going to get my master's in actually sports industry management. So I said, if I want to go to law school, maybe I'll become a sports agent or something like that, but I'm not really sure. But I went through that program, realized I really didn't want to do that. And so I said, like, I know that I want to start a business. And I'd started some things before, like, while I was in college. But I was like, I want to do that. And so I was like, at the end of the day, I know the most important part that you can do is to be in sales. So I tried to look out every sales job I could to just talk with people, get myself a little bit out of my comfort zone, understand how to communicate and present things. So it was really, around that time that I started to take those positions. So I had a job that I didn't feel was really in my space or the thing that I should do. So I left that job, and I decided I wanted to do more freelance writing because I was like, that's more in my calling, the thing that I love to do. So I was gung-ho on like, I'm going to do freelance writing. I'm going to make this work. And about 45 days after I left my job, I tore my Achilles tendon. And when I tore my Achilles tendon, I was, luckily at home. So that helped out a lot. I didn't have a lot of overhead and bills to pay and, just some student loans and things like that, but it wasn't substantial. But I was really, really down in the dumps because I was, hell bent on like chasing my dreams and doing the thing I was called to do and just all those things you hear and read and see. And it didn't go the way that I wanted it to go. So I found myself not completely with a torn Achilles, but torn enough to where I was in bed for about, I want to say 3 to 6 months or so. It took from like starting to walk again, starting to learn how to walk again, being, stuck in a bed, not able to get around. And it was really like a difficult time. So for me, like even just mentally, because again, you try something, you always think that you can do it. And then when, what does Mike Tyson say? Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And I got punched in the face or in the Achilles really, really hard. And it really changed, a lot of things for me. But honestly, a lot of what I started with CO Blog Nation happened there because I couldn't get around to do the freelance writing that I did before. I had to do everything on the computer. So I started to like use a tool called Hero, Help a Reporter Out, where I would find out from entrepreneurs and business owners why they started their business, advice they would have for other CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business owners. And I started to compile like all these things. But the only reason that happened, honestly, is because I tore my Achilles. And as painful as it was, I think it ended up, putting me in a better place that planted the seeds for everything that I've been doing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I was going to bring that up too. So it's like a blessing or opportunity in disguise, right? So, and you could have just sat there and just be like, I'm done and give up. But then what'd you do? Pick up the computer one day and just started doing your thing, and just took off?
Yeah, absolutely. That was what it is. I'm a big believer in God, and I feel like I'm hard-headed enough that God had to take out my Achilles tendons for me to be able to stop and just pay attention and do that. Because I feel like I'm so, hard-headed, sometimes for the good, sometimes not so good, that I wouldn't have stopped doing what I was doing had I had not been in that spot.
Yeah. So how long were you starting to do all this computer work and stuff and then got to like where you are today?
Yeah, so it took me probably about 3 or 4 years, honestly. So I bounced around after I got back on my ones and twos. I ended up finding a job. I worked actually a little bit in the sports industry. I actually ran sports camps all across Northern Virginia. And I would teach the 2 to like 5-year-olds how to like throw footballs and things like that. So it was super exciting, absolute favorite job that I've ever had. In terms of doing that, I would walk in with a big inflatable Mr. Football and the kids would be all excited and I would teach them like different skills and things like that. So I had that job, but I didn't feel like that job was stable. So I went and I took another job that was like an outside sales job for a company that really wasn't stable either. So I said, this isn't the right space either. So I went back to the outside sales, the sports company that I was working with. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, I got laid off. So I was right. And again, I found myself in that spot. But at that time, I think that was kind of like that pivotal spot where my mindset switched a lot. And I knew that if I could at any point, I would try to work for myself because I didn't want to be put in that position again. So I did take another job after that. I found another job. There was another outside sales job. I didn't think that was stable either. Honestly, this was like in 2009. So everything was just kind of chaotic. 2009 to probably about 2011, 2012 or so, where it was just kind of chaos. Every manager I had left within a week of me getting there, and it wasn't me. It was just like at that time. And so I took that outside sales job and I knew that I wasn't going to stay there. So I started to do a lot of the website stuff. Then my honest way that I would get in the door, because I was selling advertising, was to talk about people's website. And honestly, I didn't even realize it was of any value. To me, it was just a way to get in the door. But I called somebody that was in a networking group. His name's Mike Moss. And Mike Moss said, hey, I'll come here and, come and talk with me. So I talked with him, told him, all about his website and said, hey, do you want to buy some advertising? He said, no, but I'll work with you here on this SEO stuff. And he introduced me to a networking group. And that's really where everything kind of came in. It gave me a lot of confidence. I had a lot of people like Pam Tripp and people that saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself or saw the value in it. And it was only because of that there, I'm talking to you now. That's what kind of led me to those things that I was doing now. So it's probably about 3-4 years, but it feels like the longest 3 or 4 years of my life.
Right. And so I get this a lot from some people I talk to, right? They tell me like, look, if I was to tell you this 4 years ago that I would be doing this, I wouldn't even thought about it. And it sounds like that's what you're telling me.
Yes, exactly.
Going back to the kids and stuff, like, it sounded like you really enjoyed that. You didn't really dive too much into it, but would that be something you would consider doing something again, not make it like a job, but maybe like a volunteer position or whatever?
Oh, no question. Funny enough, so when I first started my digital marketing business, I really had a lot of things that I was doing. So I was laid off from that position, but that was like a franchise, and that franchise wasn't in the area. So I still had some relationships with some of the schools that I taught with. So while I was building my digital marketing business, I also taught at 3 or 4 of the schools. And then I also got my master's, so I found out I could be an adjunct professor. So I was also an adjunct professor at Northern Virginia Community College for like a year and a half or so. And I was like on a leadership for my networking group. So I juggled all those different things at the same time. But I kind of was at a point where I was literally like burning out every Thursday. I was exhausted. And I asked myself, like, what is going to be that foundational thing I can kind of lean on? Not to say that this is going to be the only thing that I do, but it could be foundational enough. And honestly, I leaned on that digital marketing because I felt like if I can get this up and going, then it would give me the opportunity to go back and teach the kids. It would give me the opportunity to, do all these different things. But I wanted to build something that I felt like was, it could be used anytime, any place, any industry. And I felt like that was that. If I chose any other routes, who knows where I would have been, but I felt like that was something that I wanted to lean on so that it can open up more opportunities, like, exactly what you're speaking about.
That's awesome. So I would imagine if you're not there yet, you're pursuing it, you're going to get there. But you're providing value yourself to other people so you can open up your free time to hopefully volunteer, whatever you decide to do. That's cool. And I'm asking because, it sounds like I'll become a soccer coach this year. About that, I knew nothing about soccer, but I'm willing to step up to the plate because not too many people are, and it's just gonna be a great time. We'll see where it goes, but I enjoy being around children too. And whether young. I mean, my daughter's 11 now, so even now I still enjoy that. So and. You build those foundational building blocks for those kids, leadership or, whatever skill as far as teamwork and, batting, with an inflatable bat. I don't, but it's a good start.
Yes, absolutely. At that age, they're just trying to stand up right.
That's right. Yeah. You go around each other, right?
Exactly.
But, and so the SEO, that was new, I mean, like you never really studied that and said, this is what I want to do. Somebody just threw it in front of you and said, go this path. Right. And it sounded like you just opened up your mind, your eyes and just went, okay, let's see if this works. And if this is for me. So, I mean, what was that like for you? Because I know you shared how it came about, but I mean, like, how'd you dive into it then and actually become really serious?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is what is you can see further by standing on the shoulders of giants. So I'm really big, as much as I went to Howard and Georgetown. I say, I got my doctorate, I guess, in Google and my doctorate in YouTube too. So just learning a lot from hearing things and reading things. And at that time, it was kind of a lot older. We're talking like 10 years or so ago of, just kind of learning as much as you can. And I think that was something that I think was really beneficial to me, is like having sites. And I'd built sites. My mom has a embroidery business. So I'd built sites. I'd been around it, but again, I didn't see it as any value. I just said, I like tinkering with things. I like technology. So let me try this out. And it was only by kind of starting to understand and starting to see that it's of value. That's when the doors open up to really like start to study, start to understand, start to test those things out. But again, it wouldn't have happened if I was kind of, I guess, vacuuming myself. It was other people that say, hey, you should be doing this full time. I remember talking to Pam Tripp, who I met through, she had a yearbook site, and I met her through, I think, a referral from somebody else. And every time I would get nervous talking to her because she was like, are you doing this full time? I'm like, no, not yet. I'm working on you need to be doing this. She would be like my accountability partner without me even knowing it. And that was one of my favorite clients.
Hey, who's Pam Tripp then? Is she a big name or something? Because I don't know.
No, she's just a really good.
He's just a name. Okay, all right. Just sticking social media or something. I'm like,
no.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what you need. You need those people to support you and be behind your back. And I'm sure you still have those moments where like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna do this, or you're doing a new project or whatever, and you just like have one of those days. And like I find it for myself, you come to that pivotal point where you're like, you just gotta go a little bit further, and it's right there. Or it's right before you hit that point. You're like,
yeah,
you give up, So is there something you're working on that you probably are hitting that point?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I hit that point a lot with so what I started to do was marry the CB Nation with the Blue 16. And basically, like when I did the podcast and things like that, a lot of that was to hopefully drive more digital marketing clients and customers. But I took a pause because I hit 1,600 episodes at the beginning of last year. And I wanted to really set some time to figure out what my next step was going to be with the blog and the podcast and all of those things. And that's something where it's something that's been around, that I've been working on for a while, but from a monetization standpoint, it's something that it's a new muscle. Like it's like, do you know how to even work this out? Like, it's something that's, you have to kind of approach it with a different mindset, but also have to kind of be your own hype person as well too, while you're going through the process, because it's not necessarily as streamlined as the digital marketing was, where people were knocking on the door just saying, this is what we need. It's something that's requires a lot more creativity in terms of figuring out like how I want to build it, how I want to make it into, something that's valuable for people, that at the same time can be a legitimate business. So I've came to this phrase like content-based chamber because of a lot of the content that we've created, but it's something that's new. It's not as, I won't say easy, but it's more creative, and it's not the same business model as like the digital marketing. So it's something that I'm kind of knocking my head and kind of struggling to do those things. But I appreciate you sharing all that, because us going through this, because I think it reminds you of the journey. If you don't remember the journey, you don't remember the hard things that you didn't think you could do that you did. And sometimes you need that to know that you can kind of get through those barriers.
Yeah. And 1,600 episodes is a lot, right?
It is a little bit.
Unfortunately, you stopped. But have you thought about like repurposing the old ones you had just to keep on going?
Yeah, so this past year I did repurpose them. So I took some time. I call it like a siesta, I guess, to be able to like focus on like what I wanted to do next. So I repurposed episodes all last year, and I am doing recordings now, as we speak. But I wanted to have more direction on like what my next step was going to be, because I think I'm very much somebody like, I guess, very habit oriented and can do things over and over again once I get it down to a system. So I think one of the lessons I learned that came up consistently during the podcast was a lot of people, in order to go to a next level, you have to pause. And that's one of the hardest things to do, especially if you get in a flow when you're going and you're going. And so I forced myself to pause for that year. Not that I wasn't purposing or publishing episodes, it's just there weren't new episodes. So it gave me some space to really figure out, test out some things, try some things. But now it gives me a little bit more, I think, direction on where I want to go.
That makes sense. And I know somebody personally, and he was a guest as well, where he had one, he maybe did 5 episodes a week, and then he cut it down to 1. So he got his numbers right, and then he got it down to one a week now. As far as I know, he's still doing 1 a week. But then he went ahead and did another one, you know what I mean? And did that for a little bit, and then did exactly what you just said. It just said, look, I got to stop the second one. I got to stop being on Facebook. I got to stop doing all this stuff. And then all his focus went to whatever direction he decided to go to. So yeah, you do have to pause, reflect, take a minute and see what is working, what is not working, or how to recreate it, just like you said yourself in your podcast and everything. Yeah. No, I mean, Gresham, how does somebody like reach out to you and find more about your services and get to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the easiest way is I have a site called iamgresh.com that has links to the podcast, blog, everything that I'm working on the hacks, the CEO hacks. I call them productivity and efficiency hacks as well too, compiling those. So you can find that all at iamgresh.com, iamgresh.com.
And I have one question to ask you, just like I ask everybody else. So what are 3 key things you learned and used along your journey?
Absolutely. I think one of the quotes that I always lean on that I hold true is don't tell me the sky's the limit when there are footprints on the moon. All that basically means is that sometimes the people that are closest to you, sometimes people that you love might tell you can't do something, or they might put doubts in your mind. And a lot of times that's not about you. Sometimes it's a reflection upon them. And only when you try to reach the moon, when you try to reach the sky, when you try to go higher, when you try to do things sometimes that aren't in people's reality, does that happen. So make sure that you do that. The second thing I would say is that I often say run your own race. If you run your own race, you can't lose. And I think so many times we can get so caught up in looking next to us and saying, what is that person doing? How is that person being successful? Let me emulate who that person is. But just like I talked about, go back in that time machine and figure out honestly what makes you tick so that you can find that race that is ultimately for you and that you should lean on, more than anything else, because that's what's going to lead you there. And probably last but not least, I say often that it's not the number of hours you have in the day, it's how you leverage them. So keep in mind that when you're thinking of like what you're doing and how you're trying to be more effective and efficient, lean on the productivity and efficiency hacks. I call them the CEO hacks, because those things can help you not get the 25 hours in a day we're all striving for, but can help you take those 24 hours and use them truly effectively.
Right. So you manage your time and that focus on what you need to focus on. And I like all 3 of them. Everything you said, yeah, perfect. I hear a lot like aim for, shoot for the stars, you know what I mean? I hear that a lot more often. And obviously it's surrounding yourself with the people that are like-minded, right? And that's just going to build you up. I've joined some networking groups and stuff, and that's been nothing but a blessing in disguise. I mean, I would have never, you don't know me, you know what I mean? But I would not be this person like 3-4 years ago. So, so Gresham, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your journey, and I look forward to connecting with you and seeing where you go, further in life, to figure out your podcast, I'm excited for you. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you, John. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
You're welcome.